Welcome to another episode of the Social Hotelier podcast with me, Sam Ruttman. The show where we delve into the minds of behind the most successful ventures in hospitality. Today, I have a very special guest who has been a game changer in the luxury marketing sector. Joining us is Mark Natale, the co-founder and principal of Smarthinking Inc, a luxury marketing agency that has made waves with its innovative approach to real estate and hospitality branding. With a rich background in navigating New York's highly competitive markets, Mark has masterfully blended storytelling with strategic marketing to create unforgettable brand experiences. He consistently crafts dynamic solutions that resonate deeply within the luxury markets, all while emphasizing the company's guiding motto: think critically, act creatively. Stay tuned as we dive into Mark's journey, his insights on luxury branding, and the strategies that have positioned Smarthinking as a leader in the industry. This is an episode you won't want to miss. So welcome, Mark, and thanks for joining us today.
Sam, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
So just to get started, first for our audience to get some background, can you share more about your journey from managing fitness centers and spas to co-founding the Smarthinking? What motivated this transition?
Yeah, absolutely. When I got out of school, I moved back to my home state of New York and moved to New York City. And there I was working for a company that was building and managing fitness centers and spas in New York's residential and hotel markets. And during that process, I got heavily involved with both of those markets and what it takes to deliver service, within the hotel industry or within the luxury residential industry. And we started working on basically branded fitness centers, branded spas and things. And I realized that there was a transference there into the hotel world. And so, as I said, I got deeply immersed in that. And I saw an opportunity to start Smarthinking when I realized that the ability to not only create a brand, but deliver a brand on a day-to-day basis, which we have to do in our industry, obviously, was something that I had a strength in and wanted to do more of. And so that's the short story of how we got the company started. And we started in the New York market, working for really some of the top development groups in New York. So it was it was a whole new education for me.
Oh, excellent. So how did your experience, you have mentioned that the Parker Meridian Hotel shaped your approach to brand development in hospitality industry. Can you speak about that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. For about 5 years, I worked directly for the Parker Meridian as an employee there. And the Parker Meridian was a fantastic 731 room hotel right at the base of Central Park. It was the only privately owned Meridian in the world by the Jack Parker Corporation, and they've therefore had their ability to kind of put their own stamp on how they were going to execute that brand. And the leadership team there was great. My strongest mentor was there and really was able to kind of give us free rein to help develop these different brands within the property. And we really saw the hotel, 731 rooms is a monster hotel, right? It's a big, giant place. And we saw it as an opportunity to build, a city within a city. And so we looked at how are we going to do the restaurants? How are we going to do the guest rooms? How are the fitness center and spa going to be different? How are we going to do a coffee bar? I mean, everything that we looked at, we thought, okay, how can we create a unique experience here and do something that was different? And so we looked at this, and I think a lot of properties start off this way, where is it a branded house or a house of brands? Many properties just are a branded house, and they become, the restaurants become Le Restaurant or something along those lines, right? It's not really a conscious effort to develop a strategy. And I think the way that we looked at it at the Parker Meridian was we have all these different opportunities to create all these new experiences for people. And that was the cities within cities concept. And so there we saw, well, we've got how many restaurants we have. We have 2. How can we provide 2 very different experiences? Our fitness center, how can we make that something very remarkable? It was rated the #1 hotel fitness center in the country. It operated like it was its own entity. We then took that idea and moved it to each space within the hotel. We had an opportunity. We had this long hallway that we converted into a really great coffee space. And so we kept kind of diving into what can we do differently that kind of fits the overall idea that we're doing, which was, for lack of a better term, they used the uptown, not uptight. So it was this really nice midtown hotel that delivered fantastic experience, but not in a pretentious way.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the guiding factor for us there.
But this could have actually been any other brand. It would not have to be a Meridian. If you're listening to what you're now describing, it could have been any other brand, but you just put your own stamp on how to create what's inside the hotel.
Well, I think what it was leadership there had a very distinct idea of what they thought they could do that people would enjoy. And I think a lot of it's kind of the Steve Jobs approach. We're going to develop something that you don't know you need yet.
Yeah.
And so that was really, I think, leadership's idea there is how can we create something that's truly remarkable? And I don't mean just remarkable for the sake of, an opportunity for press or something like that, but something that really keeps people coming back and speaking about your property.
Yeah.
And so I think that was really a big part of it, is how do we take an expert approach to these different outlets within the property and give our spin on why we think you should enjoy breakfast this way. Breakfast was a big thing there. They had a very famous restaurant called Norma's that only served breakfast from 7 to 3, I believe, each day.
Oh.
And that's all they did was just breakfast. They were going to do breakfast better than anybody, and it was that way. So it was those kind of singular experiences that we were focused on. And I think this is a case study for all hotels to look at, right? Because you do have all these different opportunities to create experiences throughout your property, and most of them are forgotten experiences, right? People, the leadership or the ownership team or management is really focused more on maybe one aspect or another, but you do have all this real estate within your property, and how can you turn it into an experience and therefore a profit center?
Yeah. I mean, all I remember about the Meridian brand from the years I was in US, that they always said bonjour, and then they gave you a baguette when we were leaving.
Yeah.
But I think you did more than that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was definitely, the Parker Meridian was very different. What's interesting now is to see the Meridian brands as they exist nowadays. They've always been great properties.
Yeah.
They're definitely setting trends right now. There's even a great Meridian brand in Tampa, Florida that does a great job, and there's these different outlets that Meridian has around the world, and they're doing a fantastic job. Just at the Parker Meridian, it was a different approach and it was a different rule book.
Yeah. So this was actually then part of the early in your career. So what were some of the biggest challenges you faced early at that time, and how did you overcome them?
Well, I guess the first thing when I started to really dig into the brand work and what we were going to do, how it got executed properly, that was the biggest challenge, is to really understand the comprehensiveness of these efforts. This is a big effort, and if it's done right, if it's done correctly. And I think that oftentimes people minimize that effect or the need. I think the need is great. When you look at where do you put a period behind your branding effort, there really is no place. If you think of all the different all the different interactions a guest has within a hotel, it's endless, and everything could use great brand work. From the key card that you get at check-in with your key, to the way the telephone is answered, to the way you walk guests if you've oversold. All of these aspects can be branded, and need to be branded if it's done the right way. And so that, to me, I think was the hardest part, was to realize the complexity and the comprehensiveness of all of this. And when you can start off your brand process early on with that in mind, knowing that this is going to be pretty complete and a comprehensive experience we're going to have to deliver, it really changes the way you're thinking about things and the way you're approaching the project. And that creates efficiencies that we can get into later. But it's really, I guess for me, if you think about what was the biggest challenge for me to think about or get around on early on, was realizing how broad these projects will be when done right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe we can talk about sort of the brand development, sort of your insights and defining a brand. How do you approach the fundamental questions of brand identity? Who are you? What do you stand for? And why does it matter in your projects?
Yeah, I think that's the big one right there, Sam-Erik, that you just said, is when we sit down and look at these projects, we do exactly that. We ask 3 questions. Who are you? What do you do? And why does it matter? And the why does it matter is the hard one, right? Who are you and what do you do? People relatively quickly can come up with an answer. But when you really get to brass tacks and you go, well, why does it matter what we do? What is the key differentiator here for? Why should someone come and stay with us in a property or in a market like New York versus someone who's right across the street from us, right? Like it could be that competitive. And you do need to give them a pretty compelling reason why they should stay with you. And that's where you really get into where the rubber meets the road, right? Where you really start to figure out, well, why is it? What are we doing differently here? How are our guest rooms different? What is our experience like? If you're a business hotel, what have you done to enhance that position? And if you're a resort hotel, what outlets do you have to enhance that position? These are all things that need to come under scrutiny, and you need to be able to really pick them apart and re-engineer or engineer, I should say, if you're just starting off, engineer a really remarkable guest experience. I think that's really where the magic happens, is when you do that work.
Yeah. Very interesting. And I have not had this discussion with anyone before. And it's about the brand symphony. You described a brand as a symphonic effect.
Yeah.
And I look at some of the posters behind you that has to do with music. So I just wonder, is that you grew up with music and this is how it kind of started to develop in your mind about the brand development?
Yeah, it did. I'll date myself here, but I grew up as a young kid, and I experienced the band Kiss for the first time when I was 6 or 7 years old. And they were big time brand, right? Yeah. That was definitely a real takeaway, and they took you to a different place. And back in the day when you just had a record player and a record album to look at, you create the story in your mind. And so that's where a lot of that started for me. And yeah, there are band projects behind me here, Van Halen and such, because I do think, it's a really interesting case study for me to look at music and to see how those bands become brands. And what's more fascinating to me now, and if you want evidence of the reason to brand, just look at Queen's most recent catalog sale. They sold their catalog for over $1 billion, and that's because music isn't being produced as much as what it used to be, and now that asset is being held and wanted to be utilized later on in life, when even the lead singer is passed on at this stage, but they're still doing that. I see those as very interconnected, and everything from the naming of something to the way they act on stage to the way you get that all it's interconnected. And to be honest, in the hotel business, right, we are in show business in a way, right? If you're doing it right, if you're doing it right, you do step on stage each day. And your staff needs to know that. So I see a lot of similarities here. And that symphonic effect, you're exactly right, Sam-Erik, that's something that we've coined as the symphonic effect of your brand work. And that basically states that, if you go to see any symphony play, you see the brass play singularly or the woodwinds play singularly. It's beautiful. But when everybody plays together, that's when you get the big symphonic effect. Yeah. And the same thing happens with brands. You can have a great website experience. You can have a great phone interaction. You can have great text messages or whatever it is that you're doing. But what about when you get there? What are the rooms like? What's the experience like with staff? What's the experience like once you step outside the hotel? How are we taking care of you outside of the hotel? All of those things combine to make that symphonic effect. And that's really that's what the brand work is, right?
Yeah.
And that's really what people take away with them. So that's how we come up with that idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my memory is, I was about the same age as you. Kiss wasn't not available at that time, but I grew up with classic music. So I was listening to Mozart.
Yeah.
And was an opera called Magic Flute. And it had a very deep it was such a deep feeling of listening to the Queen of Night aria and the whole Magic Flute. And somehow that music and how operas were created in that time period has also left me with always ideas about how the hotel experience should be for the guests. It's like an operatic experience. It starts with the overture, the prelude, and then it goes to the slowly, and then goes to allegro, to the kind of happy moment, and it should be a little bit of gracefulness, and then you have grand finale. And I always think on those terms. I mean, obviously you're not able to do all that, but just thinking that you have to create somehow of creating some excitement for the guests when they arrive, that it's not going to be that like a checking in, sir, and then that's the end of it, and then you pay your bill and left. A lot of things will happen in that, what we call customer journey. And what you're doing with branding, I think is just fantastic. I think that all those things, the symphonic effect in terms of branding, and then the operatic hotel experience for the customer, somehow is that a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's exactly right, Sam-Erik. And the fact that you can call up those emotions briefly, just as you're describing them to me about listening to Mozart, that you can see it in your body, that you can call up remembering listening to those for the first time, what that experience gave to you, all that stuff. That all translates. That's all this systemic, feeling inside that will translate in the same way that it does when you have a guest come to your hotel.
Yeah.
I was recently in Santa Monica, and I stayed at what I think is a new brand called The Proper. And they did such a fantastic job in all aspects. I couldn't say enough good things about the property. And it's the feeling, you have the feeling while you're there, but then also thinking back, what it was like for me to be in those spaces, for me to eat that food, for my kids to be there with me, all that, all that comes back into it. And hotels, when done right, have that opportunity to create those experiences for people, and they really become these memorable experiences. And it's really fun. I think everybody that's in the industry, that's why you're there, I think,
Yeah. And many of those are unscripted, which happens
without
just
a doubt
at the moment. And it really takes, if you try to script those things, I think they don't they're not fake. I won't call fake, that's the wrong word, but they don't feel as authentic, because it requires from the associate, the team, who are there at the moment, that can do something which is called magic moment, all kinds of words for it. But it's a very difficult thing, but it takes a lot of emotional intelligence to pull it off.
It does. And it's a great point that you make, Sam-Erik, and I don't know if enough people think about that. But that's really one of the big parts of the brand work when done right, is the operational confidence to deliver this.
Yeah.
And that is something, like you said, you don't want to give people a script and say, here, read this script, because people get that. And, they understand that. And we're getting enough of that right now with AI and things, right? That there's these scripts that are kind of generated and people are receiving that. This is the human interaction. And so a good brand stand operating procedure should give guidelines for people as to how you're going to deal with people. And can you read, like you said, the emotional intelligence to read the guest? What would be the best thing for me to say to this guest that's on brand? Might be different than if I have a different guest in there who's more high energy. Maybe I might have a different interaction, but still within the kind of branded confines of what the SOP might allow or ask for. So this is where I talk about the complexity of things, and so I'm not going to bore you with that. No. This is the part about when I was younger of how complex this is. This is it.
Yeah. Well, in my early days, I was working in an environment where SOP was basically the rule, and one of my jobs was to write procedural manuals for restaurants.
Yeah,
and it was in a different country, and I wrote on the script that in the morning, good morning, sir, -ma'am. That's what I wrote, because and I understood that the staff will clearly know what to say.
Right.
But what happened was that they called everybody "Good morning, sir, ma'am." So okay, I learned my lesson very quickly.
We got to work a little more together, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. But it's perfect, right? And it's really lends to the fact of how much managing and educating is just an ongoing thing. Let's practice it. Let's run a dry run of this. Let's try it again. What could you have done differently? All these things. It's great. But you're exactly right, Sam-Erik. These are the things that need discussion.
Yeah. So I was just thinking standing out, what strategies do you recommend for independent hotels to compete with larger brands? How can they leverage the unique identity effectively? I mean, many people feel that you need to be a part of a legacy brand to stand out, but I'd like to get your view on this because some of the best hotels are considered to be either legacy brand or they are or independent. But how do the independent hotels should be able to stand out compared to some of the legacy brand that have a totally different setup than they have?
Yeah, we'd have to get into the definition of terms here and things, but the first thing that comes to my mind when we go down this road, and there's a lot of this talk in the real estate market too about branded hotel or branded residences now.
Yeah,
and we can talk about that as well. But the first thing I say when people say, you need to be a part of a flag or whatever it might be, I understand from a reservation systems, the efficiencies that builds. I get that. But how do you explain then places like Chateau Marmont or the Beverly Hills Hotel, the Parker Meridian, which we were just talking about, which these are places that made a conscious effort to say, we're going to make this a fantastic experience based on what we think. And if you've gone to any of those hotels, if you've ever been to the Beverly Hills Hotel, it's a fantastic experience. And I know they're owned by a larger group, but it's a fantastic study in what an independent brand can do and hold that place in people's minds. And so when you think about what an independent property, there's a lot of things, but what I would say here in the short time that we have, I think there's two things. We say this sometimes, that like when you were a kid and you'd get into a scuffle with somebody, myself, I guess, you'd say something, they'd say something back to you. You'd say, yeah, you want to make something of it? I think that statement is perfect. That's really what you're looking at as you're sitting down to build any property, be it a hotel or a real estate project. Do you want to make something of it? Yeah, I would hope. I would think that you're trying to do something pretty remarkable here. And if so, then there's a whole list of things that have to go into that. So that's the first thing I would say is it's really something that you want to be known for? Do you have a space in your market that you can create a clear channel to own that position? That's the first thing. And then the other quick thing I would tell you here, I think that the consistent connection, building an audience and then having a consistent connection with them is key. A lot of that's done digitally, right? You do that through social media to an extent. You're in a noisy place there, right? Because you've got a lot of things that are competing. I think email is probably your most productive way to do this. And I think, if you can sit there, you can look at the return on investment on email, you should be seeing huge multiples. If you're not, and when I say huge, I think you should be looking at 50 times your ROI and up. If you're not getting those numbers, you need to look at what you're doing that way. But I think that the consistent development of a storyline that you're going out with and telling people of what you have going on, and then this is content marketing, right, that we're talking about, but having something that's truly remarkable to talk about. Something you can be doing differently, some way you can position yourself versus your competitors and keep going back out there, building that audience, because you do have return guests, right? And obviously this differs from resort properties to business properties and such, but you do need to have some commonality, you need to have some consistent messaging that's going on there. And I think that's the first thing after you want to make something of it that you can start right away. There's obviously a lot more you can do with architecture and what your outlets are offering and how you're becoming differentiated that way. But those would be kind of my quick points that I would cover here. There's obviously a lot more to discuss, but
sure.
That's where I would start.
Yeah. But also, once a hotel is in operation, they can learn something from retail, because retail is
Oh, yeah.
always keeps on evolving, changing. Every 7 weeks or 8 weeks, there's something going on.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about changing the interior in every hotel room that often, but there's something that the hotel brands and hotels specifically should be looking at the retail, because they know they're doing something very differently, because they will lose their customers so quickly if they don't have a positive thing and observe. And that is really why I always talk about the general managers should be walking the floor, not being sitting checking
Sure.
out be in the office. So I mean,
Yeah.
that's my side note.
Yeah. It's a great point. Retail is in an interesting spot right now because so much of this is moving digital.
Yeah.
But then and so there's two things on this. They have to become more creative. They have to become more creating different experiences for people and getting them to come to the store. But then they're also looking at how do we merge the two worlds, right?
Yeah.
So like I know there's groups right now that have a great in-store experience, but might not carry the inventory, but then give you the ability to, I'll have these to you tomorrow at your home. You know what I mean? And so they're able to do that ordering there. Great model. The thing that's interesting for us in the hotel and real estate business is we are not going to be replaced by digital product, right? We're not, you're not going to go and buy a room online that you then sit at your house and consume it there. You have to come and experience our work.
Yeah.
That gives us a tremendous advantage. You know what I mean? That gives us a tremendous advantage to get people to come to our property, experience it, but you got to be good at the experience then, right? That's really what it comes down to, is you got to be really great at the experience. And so retail, Sam-Erik, to your point, if you're like me, you probably, look how often the retail brands are emailing you, probably once a day. That's how much they want to stay top of mind with you. And I think that those strategies are applicable as well to the hotel market. And you can differentiate and come with different messaging. You can come with rooms messaging. You can come with F&B messaging. You can come with spa messaging. And keeping in contact with these people 4 to 5 times a month, or 6 or more, you know what I mean? Whatever it might be, rather than the single one shot a month that a lot of people do, or similar approaches.
Yeah. I saw this summer, particularly some of the luxury consumer brands, the Italian brands and French brands, that they are doing things with hotels also. They have putting even pop-up shops in the hotels. If it's a resort, I remember one brand who has a very bright color red. They put those bright red umbrellas at the poolside.
Yeah.
And so they are kind of using the opportunity to, the hotel realize that they have a luxury customer who are comfortable with the luxury brands, and now they are also working together on these things, which I found quite fascinating. I think I believe there's going to be more to this eventually, and I just thought, have you noticed this, and what are your feelings?
I have. I think that that's something that can benefit both groups.
Yeah.
You're basically, as the brand, the retail brand is basically having a boutique within your property.
Yeah.
And that's just great because they get, face-to-face or hands-on experience with potential new clients, or building deeper relationships with existing clients. But then the hotel then also has content that they want to go out there and talk to people about, maybe at a slow time. Hey, we're having, Givenchy or somebody they're going to be servicing our pool this summer. So come on out and experience Givenchy in a different way. We'll have this and, or whatever it might be, so these are all interesting aspects. I think they're beneficial for both ends. I also think, though, too, that certain hotels might be, let's think. I guess certain hotels might be wary of that by bringing in another brand. They might already have their own brand that they want to push that way. Maybe they're already doing something at the pool or at the boutique or whatever it might be. These are all positive things, but they have to be thought of with some strategy, long-term strategy. I guess that'd be my one takeaway on this, because these things can be good and they can bring immediate traction for people, but I don't know if in the long run that's the right fit. I don't know. These are all aspects that need to be considered on a case-by-case basis. But they're definitely, you're right, Sam-Erik. These are definitely things that are happening now, and people are doing more of an extension with those types of cooperatives.
Yeah. I notice now the branded residence, and I'd like to, if you can speak about that. What have you observed, and what are you doing within your work about the trend of branded residences and maybe in the common pitfalls that you see in this area?
Yeah, I think right now there's a rush for this, right? A lot of people are talking about, branded resident. I mean, you can basically open up any trade publication. Somebody's talking about, the benefits or the pitfalls or what are branded residences, which, these are really interesting points. We've been talking about these for some time now, and I think some of the larger markets have been doing this work for a long period of time. I go back to the idea of the independent property. In New York, there's a property there called the Dakota, right? Which is probably most famous for where John Lennon lived. It's also where they shot Rosemary's Baby. It's a fantastic building, beautiful building. And it's been in existence, I think, since 1922 or something like that. Don't quote me on the date, but it's around that time. But that's been a branded property since then. You know what I mean? It's just, and then, so they're like, we're going to make something of this. We're going to make this a great property. And so there is this rush right now, I see, to go out and license brands for properties. Here in Miami, there's a lot of that going on right now. I know the L Residences just opened. I know, I think there's the Porsche Tower. There's a lot happening here, right? Even Diesel, the fashion brand, has a property here. I think that's all great if it can make sense and it can, sustain. I think oftentimes people are like, let's go get this brand and we'll get that. We'll have a place, we'll have a position in the market. And I think that's good. You definitely need a position in the market. I think some things to ask, though, is that brand ready for you to do what you want to do? A lot of these brands that people are turning to are fashion brands. Well, how does that translate into real estate? How does that translate into a residential experience? Do they have the assets that you need? We've run into this before where we come in and we're like, okay, here we go. And I'm like, what assets? What do you mean assets? I'm like, well, what kind of photography do we have? What kind of film? Okay, we got to start from scratch here. So, and so you have to then say, well, how is this brand going to be applicable to what we're doing? And so I think there's obviously a lot of benefits to getting that branded licensure and doing that work. If you think that can help with your sales velocity and your price per square foot or whatever metrics you're measuring, I think that's good. Just go into it with open eyes and make sure that you're going to have a long-term investment on this in something that, if that brand falls, you don't fall either, because that does happen. So
sure does.
These are things that you have to consider.
Yeah, case in point, from the years I spent in Dubai, where I saw many of those branded residences. They used car brands, you name it, all kinds of brands. And that's now 10 years ago since I left. And some of those doesn't exist anymore. They were just sort of a flash in the pan at the time.
Yeah. And so, it's all about that unique perspective, right? That's really what you have to think of. How is this brand going to help us create this unique perspective that people are going to want to be a part of? That's really the cycle that's happening there.
Yeah.
And so you really just have to think about, this is a brand we should leverage because we like this perspective that they have. We think this is going to bring top dollar and we're going to get better occupancy rates quicker or whatever it might be. But there's a lot to figure out there. And so I guess my only one point on this, Sam-Erik, would be as people move into this, and this is a trend, right? Just go into it with your eyes wide open, understanding all the aspects that you're going to need to have for a long-term project.
Yeah. We talked earlier about corporations and collaborations between like a brand agency like yourself and architectural teams. Could you speak about that opportunity and from the state? At what point do you come into a project, or has the architect been appointed already, or are the cases where you are the first one at working on the project with the owner?
Yeah, this is a great question, and it's something we deal with a lot. We just signed a new project here in the southeastern United States where it's at that infancy. It's a property that's being bought and completely renovated. And we like to work very closely with the architectural interior design team right from the beginning, if we possibly can do that. Oftentimes we can, because we're getting in at the right time. Hopefully everybody's getting in at the right time. But really the work that we're doing with the architectural team is together we're telling this story. The architectural team is telling it in, 700,000 square feet or whatever it might be, right? So they have this big canvas that they're going to paint this on. And I think what we're able to do is help come in and give some guidelines around that and say, hey, but well, how would we operate? How would we build a spa here based on what the story is that we're telling? What's the spa build? How does the spa build reflect the brand? And so for us, it's really important. We work closely with a variety of different architectural groups, and HKS being one of them. And it's great because it's right from the beginning, we're getting each other. We're understanding each other. Okay, this is what we want to achieve here, but what about this? We're just helping to, I guess, round out that conversation with the developer or whomever the executive team is. But we see that, Sam-Erik, is so important to be, starting off right on the same foot together if we possibly can. And I know that when we get involved, when there isn't an architectural team in place, that's one of our first questions is, who is the architectural team? Who are we going to be working with? Can we help you with that? Helping you define who you might consider, because we just think it's that important, not only from just all of us singing from the same song page, but for efficiency's sake. There's oftentimes projects will be started, money is spent, and things are built, and then you don't want to undo them. You've already put the investment in. So if we can do it right from the beginning and get people involved right from the beginning, or getting that team, I guess, involved right from the beginning, it's incredibly beneficial, and it's a joy to work on those projects. For me, it's just because everything falls into place, like a puzzle, really relatively quickly.
Could you maybe speak about some common mistakes or mistakes that they should be avoiding when implementing a brand strategy? What are the things that they should be aware of? Is it assertiveness or consistency, or don't change your mind all the time when you're speaking with your? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, going back to our conversation about music, it's really having the sheet music, right? And the sheet music is the strategy, right? It's what are we doing here? And a lot of the times that's defined. We do that where we'll work on a fairly large brand narrative, right? And what we're doing in that process is we're going back and forth with the developer and architecture team and trying to figure out, is this how we want to represent ourselves? This is an opportunity for us to exploit for the positive. This is something we should avoid as a negative. That kind of narrative that we're trying to lay down in the beginning starts it off where everybody goes, yeah, I agree. And so to me, that's the number one thing, that when people get started on their brand work, ultimately, you've got to start on the strategy, and for the sake of this conversation right now, I'll talk about it as a narrative. What is it? What is the story that we're telling, and how is it being told throughout the entire property? Oftentimes what happens with people when they go, well, we need to work on our brand. They say, I come in, and the only thing they're talking about is the logo or the icon. And that's good. And I understand it from like the purest definition of brand, of like branding a horse or branding a cow. There's the logo. We own that cow, right? That's part of our ranch. But when you're talking about it here, you don't want to jump off on that. That's one of the last things that comes into place, right? Because you got to do is define that story beforehand. We've walked in on projects before. I walked into a project several years ago in a major metropolitan area where someone had just purchased 2 properties that were already existing. and operational, and they were branding them to their new brand. And I said, so what is it that you want to work on with the brand? Is it the logo or is it and before I could get the next words out, they said, stop right there. We've spent $100,000 on the icon and the logo. We all do not like it, but we've spent the money and that's going to stay where it is. And I thought, oof, that's a tough way to start a big project, right? You're taking on 2 new properties in a major metropolitan area and you don't like your identity. Those types of inefficiencies, those misstarts, those misfires, if you're implementing brand strategy from the beginning the right way, you avoid that. So there's the marketing aspect of brand work that you're doing, but then there's also the efficiency aspect that from an owner standpoint, that's key, right? Like we want to spend as little money as we need to, or we want to spend it as wisely as we can. And so that's really what a good brand work should be doing from the beginning, is making sure you're focused, you're laser focused.
You stayed in many hotels, I'm sure, and maybe there are some memorable moments. So can you share maybe an anecdote that highlights the importance of a cohesive brand experience, perhaps similar to the facial treatment story you mentioned when we discussed before?
Yeah. So so just briefly, on the front of that, I can tell you that my experience at the Proper Hotel in Santa Monica recently was just fantastic. And it wasn't so over the top that you felt uncomfortable. It was just consistent delivery of great service and a unique experience. And that was great. So there's that point. I just wanted to talk about that when you're talking about staying at other properties. But your point that I told you about, this other story of, I was asked to shop a property in the California desert a while back. And so I was being asked to experience all these different facets of the property. And this is quintessential California desert. You know, I had the whole Mad Max vibe going on and everything. It was great. You know, it was like, you're definitely in a different place, tented properties and things along those lines. It was really cool. So I had to get all kinds of spa treatments there, and I got a facial. And halfway through the facial, I was in a great state, and I could tell something was changing. And the esthetician leaned down and she said to me, "I'll be right back. I just have to go to the bathroom." And I thought, ooh, okay, well, everything that we've laid out, you've just undone, you know? And so that's the kind of staff training that needs to be done. Like, that's what we were talking about earlier. You're on stage, right? Lie to me when you need to do that. Tell me you're going to go out and dig something out of the desert that's going to make me look 10 years younger, and I'll be back in 10 minutes, and then come back to me. But you don't need to tell me the truth there. So those are the types of things that you really want to be able to deliver and deliver your brand promise every step of the way. And that, you know, I was talking about the Proper earlier. I was talking about the Beverly Hills Hotel. Beverly Hills Hotel does that effortlessly. And I'm sure if you're an insider there, you know what the X's and O's are that you need to hit. But as a guest, you never see those things. And that's that on stage persona that they take really, really well.
Yeah. Any thoughts on the future of hospitality branding, and how do you see the role of branding evolving in the hospitality industry, looking ahead? And I don't want to put a decade or 5 years, but just sort of your thoughts. Where is it going in your view?
I think this is going to continue, right? I think that brands are going to get deeper and more entrenched. We see more and more, as we were talking about earlier with branded residences, more and more people turning to that to help identify their position within the market. I don't see that slowing down. I think that you're going to see, technology come in to help with that on a lot of different areas. This is a different kind of aspect for me because I am a high touch experience person. And so how do you technology can quickly be swapped out for low staff counts or low service levels. And that's fine and good. I think technology can also be used as a tool for the higher touch properties to give even something even more refined. But I think the brands in the hospitality world are going to continue to get deeper and deeper and take you into deeper and deeper experiences. I I live in Atlanta, and just outside of Atlanta, well, inside of Atlanta, I don't know if you know this, but there's an incredible amount of TV and film production going on. And Francis Ford Coppola just opened a new hotel by one of the large studios, and it's all based on films. And he made it for filmmakers and film lovers. And that's a deep dive. You know what I mean? It's a real deep dive. And so I think you're going to be able to, with the ability of niching things out that we can do technologically now, I think you can build these very niche experiences for people, market to them, and have them come and really experience something very different. And that particular hotel, I think, just opened. I haven't been to it yet, but I think you're going to see more and more of that.
Yeah, very good. We have several hotel school students are listening to my show, and so they're taking notes. And what advice would you give to someone starting their career in hospitality brand development today? What are the things that they should do to get into that career path? Because I'm sure what you have described are something that they are fascinated, and they really want to dedicate their career to that.
Yeah. I think for me, it's, I think back when Bill Clinton ran, it was, they said it's the economy, stupid, right? That's what they said, right? That to focus on the economy. For students, I think it's the experience. That if you can study the experience and study watch the people at the property, what are they doing? How are they utilizing things? What's their interaction like with your staff? How can you turn that into something that is uniquely yours? Those types of experiences, that's where you really can focus on things and create something different. And so to me, it's a lot about that. I can't emphasize the guest experience enough, because I think particularly now, they talk about the value of reviews, right? Like, reviews, that's the first thing people go to when they're going to check into your hotel. Is they're going to look at your website, then they're going to look at your reviews. What's it really like? And so it's all great case study right there for you to sit there and study, and what can we do differently so we avoid this, and how do we enhance that, and all those things. So to me, as a student coming into the industry, I think it's a great industry that is very adventurous and can take you to a lot of places throughout the world. And I think the intense study of the guest experience is where it's at.
Very good. So I'll have two questions, final questions. As many of our listeners know, I tend to follow the technology. So I realize the hotel has been sort of behind the curve, and of course the COVID and that era suddenly escalated the use of self check-ins and digital concierges and keyless entries. I'm just curious to get your view on automation in hotels. Do you think this is a way of the future, or meaning less human contact? What, good or not good?
Personally, I hope that's not the case. Again, I see technology as a tool. There's no doubt about it. The idea of less and less interaction, though, I think I think we're starting to fight against that a little bit, right? It's becoming so siloed. People are working from home doing it. And I know that's the idea of the term, the third place, right? Of you have work, you have home, and then where's the other place that you go? And I think that hotels have a tremendous opportunity to create those third places for people that are based on human interaction. In using technology to enhance the experience all you can, that's great. But if it's there to substitute for the human experience, I think that's a problem. On that trip that I was talking to you about earlier, where I went to Santa Monica and stayed at the Proper, I stayed at another property before that. And at check-in, there basically was like, we can save you money if you don't want turndowns. And I thought, we've already started the run on the bank right now. I'm like, okay, I'm going to dispute everything in this. I'm going to get my bill for nothing, because I'm just going to say, well, you're not doing this and you're not doing that. And so it's, that's not really the hospitality industry, I don't think, And so for me, Sam-Erik, I think there's got to be that really good balance. And I know that's kind of cliche, but I think there's got to be that good balance between human interaction and digital interaction. And it should only enhance things rather than replace, unless it's a totally mindless, something you don't need a person for,
Great. Mark, it has been a terrific discussion. And if when people like to connect with you or to reach out to you, how can they do so?
Yeah, so we're at smarthinkinginc.com with only one T. So good thinkers, bad spellers. So that's how you could get a hold of us online. Yeah, we'd love to talk to anybody who's got any questions.
Very good. So I will put the contact details in my show notes in the podcast and also in the description in YouTube. So Mark, thank you very much. It has been a great discussion with you, and I learned a lot about branding while listening to about how you go about it. So look forward to have another episode in the future.
Thanks, Sam-Erik. I love talking with people like you that are really invested in the industry and have a true passion for what we're doing. And I appreciate you having me on. It's been a great conversation. Thanks.